Hi everyone, and welcome to your second lesson on Antarctica. It's myself, Mr. Jones, from the Humanities department, and I'm going to be talking you through this lesson. Same that applies to the other lesson. You can pause at any time, you can play at any time. I'll prompt you to pause at certain times to complete a task, and then you press play once you've completed that task. So, starting off, our title is Antarctica, Who's for Dinner? And our objectives are: all of you will be able to complete your own Antarctic food chain. Most of you will make a complete Antarctic food web, and some of you will be able to answer questions about how humans affect Antarctica's food chains in detail. So you can pause it to write the title down, or you can follow me to the next slide. Okay, so first we've got an image where I want you to use your inference. Inference is what do you think is going to happen, or what's happened here. So when I ask you what can you infer, you look at the image and what can you work out looking at this image? What can you see has happened or going to happen? What you can write in your book is a subheading, what can you infer, and you can put your points in there. The second part is any questions. You then write a subheading, any questions, and the same again underneath. You can write any questions you have about this image. So I'd like you to pause the video and complete that task. When you're finished, press play and I will go through some of the answers you might have given. Okay, welcome back. So what can you infer? The main thing I think that most pupils and myself will infer is that you find these two orcas or killer whales hunting the seal. I can infer that they are higher up on the food chain. I can infer the seal is alone and they hunt in pairs. These are the type of things I can work out just looking at this image. Second part is any questions. You might not have known they were called orcas or killer whales, and your question would be, what's the names of the animals in this image? You might have asked why is the seal alone? You might have asked what does a seal eat? You might ask what hunts orcas themselves. These are all different questions. There's no silly questions. I'd just like you to write as many as you can because you might be able to answer them throughout the lesson. If you want to add any more, pause the video. If not, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at keywords. We're going to need these key terms and their definitions for our work today. These will need to be copied into your book or onto paper, depending on what you're using. The first three, I've left the definitions there. Carnivore, an animal that eats only meat. Herbivore, an animal that eats only plants and vegetation. And omnivore, an animal that eats a mixture of meat and plants. So a carnivore would be like a lion, a herbivore, a deer, or a goat. And omnivore would be like humans, where we have a balance between meat and plants/vegetation. I have 6 different more keywords we're going to be using today. The next part is optional, but I would encourage you to try. I'd like you to try and research what the definitions are for these words and put them into your book. If you're finding difficulty with any of them or don't understand some of the terms, please leave them blank because I'm going to go through them when you replay the video. So I'd like you to pause the video and have a go at that for me. And then press play and I'll be going through the answers. Okay, welcome back. So let's have a look at what we got. A food chain. This is essential to what we're looking at today. A food chain shows how plants and animals get their energy. It is a line, it's linear, showing what they consume, so what they eat. So it's basically what eats what to create its energy to survive. A food web is a more complex food chain. It's all the food chains in an ecosystem, so an area, are joined up together. Arrows point towards the organism they consume. Whereas you've got the food chain, which is a straight line, the food web gets its name, it's more like a spider's web. There might be some animals that eat this animal, who also eat this plant. It could be multiple prey and multiple predators. So, producer. This is the first start of our food chain. They started off. This is an organism that makes its own food. This is going to be your plants and your vegetation, okay? Grass would normally be a producer. The primary consumer, so primary first, This is an organism that eats the producer, so eats the grass, eats the plants. The secondary consumer, this is an organism, a species, or an animal that eats the primary consumers. So our primary consumers are normally herbivores, whereas secondary become omnivores and carnivores. And then finally, tertiary. This is an organism that eats secondary consumers. More than likely you're looking at your big carnivores. Okay, so you need to copy these down into your book. Hopefully you've got similar definitions to me, so you can pause the video, copy that down and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay, the Antarctic food chain. I'd like you to look at these 4 different animals and plants that live in Antarctica. We have krill, which is a shrimp-like creature. We have the emperor penguin. We have plankton, which is a marine life plant. And we've got the Antarctic squid. Underneath, we've got our 4 stages. The producer, the primary consumer, which eats the producer, the secondary consumer, which eats the primary consumer, and the tertiary consumer, which eats the secondary consumer. What I would like you to do is copy that table into your books, and I've got the 4 at the top in the wrong order. I would like you to attempt to change the order to the correct one. Have a little think which one is like a plant, and then try and refer to maybe size or omnivores, etc. Okay, so to give you a clue to start you off, plankton would be the producer, and then you can work it out from there. Please pause the video and complete that for me, and I'll go through the answers when you return. Okay, welcome back. So, the correct order was plankton as a producer, followed by krill, which eat the plankton, followed by Antarctic squid, which eat the krill, followed by emperor penguin, which occasionally eat fish and squid. Okay, so we've got our producer, primary, secondary, tertiary. It's quite simple as a chain. Plankton starts it off with the energy. Krill eats the plankton, takes the energy there. Antarctic squid eats many krill, takes that energy. Emperor penguin eats the Antarctic squid, takes the energy from those squid. So everybody should have that correct order in their books now. Okay, if you haven't, pause, you can edit it and then resume. Okay, next slide. This is where it gets a bit more complex. We've got Antarctica's food web. So, different to a food chain, a web is made up of several different chains. The arrows show which each organism consumes. So at the bottom is our producer. Then we start to look at primary, secondary and tertiary. Okay, even quaternary. So these different animals are going to be spread around here. We know this is probably going to be a plant or plankton, and then you're going to need to work out the rest yourself. So if you see an arrow here to here, this means this animal consumes this animal. This animal consumes this plant. This animal consumes this animal. So whatever the arrow is pointing to, it means that animal consumes it. Okay? So if you put, I don't know, grass here, eaten by gazelle, and then a lion eats the gazelle. And that would be, you see here, there's a small food chain there. Okay? So I'd like you to pause the video and copy that diagram into your book, because we are going to start putting animals in the right places. So please pause the video, draw the table, and then press resume. Okay, welcome back. So you should have the diagram in your book, and I've got all the animals and plants you'll need to fill in the blank boxes. I am going to talk through each slide. If you would like to fast forward or put me on mute and just read on the left, that's absolutely fine too. Okay, but I like to speak through as we're going through. I would recommend not straight away putting everything in the box you think. Wait to go through them all and then attempt the task. So we've got a Weddell seal. It can grow to 3 meters long. They're not fussy. They'll eat squid, fish, krill, and even young penguins. So we've got a few of its different prey there. The krill. which we saw earlier, grows to only 1 to 2 centimeters, very, very, very tiny. Unfortunately for them, they're food for almost everything. Next, we have the baleen whale, can grow to 34 meters long, one of the biggest on the list. Despite their enormous size, they only eat krill. So where we've got the small 1 to 2 centimeters, our large animal, which is 34 meters long, only eats the smallest. We have our killer whale, which we saw in our inference grid. They grow to 6 to 8 meters, so they scoff everything except phytoplankton. So these are large carnivores. The Antarctic icefish, it has no pigment in its blood, so underwater is almost see-through. It has no colour, its skin, you can almost look through it. This is very useful for avoiding predators and hunting prey. They eat krill and they'll eat squid. The albatross, a type of bird, they have an average wingspan of 5'7", and as you see on the left, it says as tall as Miss Gleason. They like krill and fish as their main prey. So the wingspan is from point to point. The emperor penguin, the biggest of all the penguin species, grows up to 48 inches tall. They munch on krill, fish and squid. The Antarctic squid can grow to 14 meters long, and they eat krill and small fish. And phytoplankton are tiny plants that float around absorbing energy from the sun to photosynthesis. Some are less than 1 millimeter in size. They are the favourite food of krill. So to start you off, I will tell you this is your first point at the bottom of your food web. So I've gone through every species so far. If you want to start now, I would recommend going back through the video. You can listen to me or you can just move back and forth and kind of work out where each animal goes. I'd recommend doing it in pencil in case you have to make any changes. What I will do is on the next slide, I do have a bit of a help sheet. There will be another help sheet and then I will go to the completed food web. So if you feel confident, pause and get started. If not, let the video play and go on to the next slide. Help sheet 1, Antarctica's food web. I've given you the position of a seal and I've given you the position of the plankton. So you can put those two in and then you can go back and work through. Again, if you think this is enough help, pause and carry on yourself. If not, keep listening to the video. Help sheet 2, I've included now the fish and the squid to show you how different things are linked. So if you look at this, once completed, you're going to be checking your answers against the PDF completed food web, which I've made available on Study Zone or your teacher will send to you. So this is where you pause it. You need to go on your own here and then you can check your answers against that PDF. Okay, so you've created your food web. You understand how a food web works and how delicate they can be. What we're going to look at quickly now to end the lesson is how do humans impact food webs. The impact web is how do we change them? How can we change an amount of species? How can we disrupt? How can we change how a food web works? How can we increase population, decrease population? So there's 3 different questions I've asked you. The first one is, what would happen if fishermen catch too much krill? So if fishermen catch too much krill, what issues could we see if there's not enough krill in the ocean because we've accidentally caught too many? What you need to think of is what animals are going to be affected and is there knock-on effects. If the animal does not have enough krill, that animal will start to die out. There'll be less of that animal, which means there's less of the animal that eats that. If there's not enough krill, there's going to be issues to eat, for example, the plankton, and then plankton will increase. And that's the kind of answer I'm looking for, number 1. Number 2, what other human activity could affect this food web and how? If people caught too many baleen whales, what could we see increase in there or decrease in? If people had too many seals for their fur, then, so the same concept again, how will this change the food web? Are there any populations of animals that will increase? Are there any that will decrease? And what other issues could it cause? And the last one, how could you protect this food web? This is where you're going to be putting bullet point sentences. Write any ideas you can think of. Bullet points is fine. Limit on the number of fish allowed to be caught in the Southern Ocean to protect fish populations could be a good idea. Then you can add more detail of why it's important to protect fish populations. So there's 3 questions there. This is your last task of the day. I would like you to work through question 1, question 2 and question 3. Again, you can use information I've given you and you can use your own research. So I'm going to set you off on that. That'll be the end of me speaking. Well done on the lesson. Good luck on answering these 3 questions. Your teachers will be available on Teams for any further questions. Thank you very much.